Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today is Shabbat Shuvah. It's the Shabbat of repentance. And we have a very special treat for you all today. It's my pleasure. In just a moment, we're going to hear from Aaron Dobres, from Ariel Douglas, and from Zoe Winger. In addition to Sydney Unger Milgram, myself, and Cantor Alyssa Rosenbaum, we had a really remarkable trip in an unusual place. We went to Germany through a program called Germany Close Up. I won't say too much about it because I know that they will. But it was a trip through the Bridge, which is our young adult, 20s and 30s, young professionals in downtown and the West Side organization. And the goal of the trip was to deepen our sense of Jewish identity, to experience up close the horrors of the past. But thematically, with Shabbat Shuvah, it was also to experience up close what it looks like for a country to attempt tshuva, even in the midst of the most treacherous and horrible terror you can imagine. We're not in a position to forgive Germany. That was not the goal of the trip, but it was to take part, to engage in Germany's attempt to do tshuva through reparations, through this government-sponsored program, which flies Jews out to Germany in order to learn, to see its current Jewish life, experience its memorials and museums. I just want to share one brief word of Torah before I hand it off to our guest speakers today, which is one of my favorites along the theme of tshuva, which is that in the book of Jonah, which we're going to read at Yom Kippur, something strange happens. When Jonah arrives at Nineveh and proclaims against it that God is going to destroy it, the king immediately dons sackcloth and ashes and proclaims a public fast, and they do tshuva. And Jonah is at his wit's end because he knew that God wasn't going to destroy the city, and here it is, immediately they're doing tshuva. But it's unlike any king to ever do that. Which king can you think of would listen to somebody off the street who comes pouncing into the courtroom to say that God's going to destroy it? Nobody would. So the rabbis have a very interesting solution for this. They say that the king of Nineveh is none other than Pharaoh. Like any good James Bond movie, if you don't see the villain die, they're going to show up later. Pharaoh did not drown in the sea. The rabbis understand that Pharaoh actually became king of Nineveh, and when Jonah arrived, he immediately recognized this to be true, and he was not going to repeat the mistakes of his past, and so he immediately does tshuva. So it's my honor now to introduce our special guests. I'll just say, when I grew up, my parents forbid me from purchasing German products, so it was very hard for me to find anything in Germany to subsist off of. But it was a very profound experience that we all had, so I'm very excited now to invite our first speaker, Aaron.
Thanks. Shabbat Shalom. 2 months ago this weekend, I spent my Shabbat at a synagogue that was both similar and vastly different to B'nai Yeshurun. The Neue Synagogue in Berlin is affiliated with a conservative movement, and the congregation prays in tunes I learned here at Sunday school. There are regular classes on Judaics, and just like us, they have been compelled in recent years to increase their security measures. Yet it will probably come as no surprise that Neue Synagogue's past contains far greater dangers than our own. The synagogue was attacked on Kristallnacht and only saved from total destruction by a German policeman who sought to preserve its status as a national landmark. The building was also damaged by Allied bombings and was not repaired until German reunification. In spite of the dark history, the Neue Synagogue was a place full of life on both Friday night and Saturday morning. The rabbi welcomed the 30 or so regular members and guests in a variety of languages. We enjoyed a traditional Friday night dinner, and I was even called up during the Torah service for the Aliyah Funf. That's Aliyah Chamisha, or Fifth Aliyah, if you're confused like me. The purpose of Close Up Germany is to introduce young American Jews to Jewish life in Germany and dispel any notions that the Holocaust permanently stifled the community. Reminders of the Holocaust were ever present. The expansive memorial for the murdered Jews in the city center, the Ravensbrück concentration camp in a quiet town on the German countryside, and the Stolpersteine, small stones dotting the sidewalks with the names of Berlin residents who were Holocaust victims. Yet it was easy to see how in a city as diverse as Berlin, Jews both young and old could fit into the landscape. During the trip, I considered the responsibility that young German Jews must feel to their community. Much like the synagogue, they are carrying on a legacy that once seemed destined to come to an end. We spoke with a leader from the Jewish Student Union who mentioned the difficulties of getting her non-Jewish friends to understand how Germany's history of anti-Semitism still reverberates in her family. It caused me to pause and think on the role we all play in living with outward pride in our religion, particularly when we are someone's first Jew. I've often heard, especially recently, the saying that Jews will outlive their enemies. While challenges remain, I found no greater proof of that than in Berlin. Shabbat Shalom.
As many of you know, this past August, our shul participated in a program called Germany Close Up, North American Jews Meet Modern Germany. This program is targeted at North American young Jews between the ages of 18 to 39, with an aim of giving participants the opportunity to experience contemporary Germany firsthand, to encourage German-Jewish North American dialogue, as well as to strengthen the involvement of the North American Jewish community in transatlantic relations. In their own words, each Germany Close-Up program provides a framework for participants to experience and explore contemporary Germany. In so doing, it does not try to present one set picture, but rather to expose participants to a variety of elements that make up Germany today. All programs contain units looking at both the past and the present. Units focusing on the past explore Germany's efforts to deal with the memory of the Shoah and the Nazi terror up to the present day. Units focusing on the present consider the changes in German politics and society over the past decades. Each program also looks at the reemergence of Jewish life in Germany and the current growth of the Jewish community. Intriguing? I certainly thought so. The more I learned about the trip and the program, the more interested I became in participating. After all, what did I really know about modern-day life in the country? Nothing really, and I always strive to take opportunities to learn and grow. As a teacher myself, I value education, and the chance to experience something new and broaden my worldview was too good to pass up. I'd only ever really learned about Germany in the context of history, so I was very excited to learn about contemporary life there. Boy, was I not disappointed. From the moment I stepped into the city of Berlin, right up until the last evening, my days were filled with new information and meaningful experiences. Being in a group of people around my own age and of similar background allowed me to experience this trip as part of a community and really strengthened my ties to the larger community of the Bridge, the Young Professionals program associated with our synagogue. That first evening there might have been one of my favorites of the whole trip. Some of us chose to venture into the heart of Berlin for dinner that night, and I am glad to have picked that option. We had eaten a big lunch at the donor place around the corner, so I wasn't very hungry. Good thing there was a fancy gelato place within walking distance. On our walk there, we stopped at a monument that was a fountain you could go up to the top of. We saw the Brandenburg Gate and stopped for some photos, and then passed by the Berlin Wall Memorial. On the corner between that and the restaurant we were headed to, a surprise was waiting. A city festival was set up with booths full of tchotchkes, various food vendors, and a stage for street performer acts. And yes, we did return on another night to enjoy the festivities. The gelato was very impressive, and on our way back, we could hear something going on in the distance. I chose to investigate, and I'm so glad I did. On the facade of the Marie Elizabeth Luder's house, which sits in front of the Reichstag, or the Parliament building, a sound and light show entitled People and Parliament 75 Years, Democracy Alive was being projected. It was about the formation of the German government from the end of World War II up until the present day. The video was in German with English subtitles, and passers-by could sit on the bank opposite and watch this half-hour show every night after sunset on repeat. It was a perfect introduction to what we would be learning on the trip, and I was really glad to have that foundation of knowledge for the preceding days. Fast-forwarding now to the end of the week, we attended the Neue Synagogue on Oranienburger Strasse for Friday night services and Shabbat dinner. Don't be fooled, though it is called the New Synagogue, it was actually built in the mid-1860s. It is an impressive and beautiful building, and the congregation was very welcoming. Hearing familiar tunes and davening in the small sanctuary at the top of the establishment was a deeply meaningful experience to me. There were people from all around the world in attendance, from Sweden, London, Brazil, Ukraine, and so many more. It really felt special to come together as a community for Shabbat in this place. During dinner, I sat with the clergy, a rabbi couple with their chazan daughter, a pair of elderly ladies from Brazil, and a couple from California. We spoke about our lives, and I asked many questions about their experiences in Germany, especially as Jews. The two ladies were sisters whose father was from Berlin, and they spend every summer in the city with their children and their families who have moved back. They believe it is a great place for their grandchildren to grow up, even with all the changing politics and sentiments in the world right now. This speech is not long enough for me to dive into everything I've experienced during my time in Berlin, but I hope that it has conveyed how much I valued the trip. I would be happy to elaborate on the many other opportunities I had whilst traveling. The exhibits at the Jewish Museum Berlin were very interesting and moving, and the walking tour of Jewish Berlin was full of fascinating history. I'd love to speak about the profound experience of visiting the Ravensbrück concentration camp and our group discussion afterwards that so helped me in the processing of my thoughts surrounding the experience. Or maybe you'd like to hear about the time I spent at the Memorial of the Murdered Jews of Europe, both with the group during the day and at night on my own. It was really interesting to have two different but equally profound experiences of the same place. I encourage you to come speak with me about the many other opportunities I had on my trip and look forward to sharing further observations with anyone who wishes to hear more. I would like to thank everyone who made this adventure possible, and I hope that if you yourself are ever presented with such an opportunity, you will be inspired to take it as well. Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Zoe Winger. This past August, I had the privilege of traveling to Germany with 22 other Jewish Clevelanders with the Bridge and B'nai Asherin. When I first heard about this trip at one of the iconic Bridge happy hours, I thought to myself, what a strange place to take a group of Jewish people, and I brushed off the idea. A couple months passed by, and October 7th happened. I had a friend who was murdered. Gili Adar was celebrating and enjoying life at the Nova Music Festival when she was killed. Gili and I met back in 2018 when I was living in Israel for the year. She was known for being a ray of sunshine, many calling her sun on earth. Her zest for life and fearless pursuit of adventure left a lasting imprint on everybody fortunate enough to have known her, including me. After her passing, a couple of her close friends made stickers to help keep her memory alive. They are a beautiful yellow with a hand-drawn portrait of Gili and the words "Sun on Earth" written in Hebrew above. Throughout this past year, those who knew her have been putting those stickers all around the world to spread Gili's sunshine. I knew this was my opportunity to carry on this tradition. While walking through the streets of Berlin, I saw glimpses of Gili everywhere, from a funny store sign that I knew she would giggle at to the stunning street art all over the city. Throughout my time in Berlin, I was on the search for the best place to put Gili's sticker. On one of my last days, I went back to a previous spot we had visited right outside of the Anne Frank Museum, where there was an alley with plants climbing up the buildings, colorful flags canopied throughout, beautiful murals painted on the walls, and a large door covered in stickers of people who had visited before. I knew this was the perfect place to put Gili's sticker. Throughout the trip, we had two wonderful tour guides who helped us navigate the city, answer our endless questions, and share their experiences. One of them spoke to us about growing up in Germany. He shared that in grade school, every German student learns about the Holocaust and visits a former concentration camp. This really stuck with me. Rather than trying to erase the past, Germany chooses to educate. Not that it didn't happen, but that it will never happen again. Germany took me by surprise. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe to be Jewish. Learning about the German culture and how the country goes above and beyond to try and right the wrongs of their past give me hope for the future during such a dark and scary time. Thank you to Rabbi Josh and Cindy Unger for leading this remarkable trip to further my Jewish education and help me share Gili's light. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you again to Zoe, to Ariel, to Aaron, for sharing such heartfelt and powerful words about your experience. Something that keeps coming back to me, just like you were saying, is the idea of an imprint. That this was in many ways going back to retrace our steps, to see the Stumpelstones, as Cantor Rosenbaum with her perfect German has hammered into me. But to see where we came from and then to return there, to return to the site and add our own imprint, whether it's Gili's sticker or our own footsteps. And lastly, just that idea of if our worst enemies can attempt tshuva, if Germany, what's stopping us in this season of repentance from taking a look at ourselves and trying to do and be better? Lastly, I just want to say that on a personal note, with Cantor Rosenbaum in Sydney, we felt like this trip really deepened our ties to, as you mentioned, 22 Bridge participants. That was, for me, the true joy and takeaway of the trip, was just to deepen our bonds and connections, to see this vibrant group so alive in Berlin, a place of such death and destruction. And I think for many ways a dramatic climax of that for me was in Ravensbrück, as you guys mentioned, in the concentration camp. Cantor Rosenbaum led us in El Male in the memorial blessing. And one of those German tour guides that you mentioned said that a highlight for him of the trip that he'd never experienced before with so many other trips, because they didn't have the benefit of a cantor, was the power of Cantor Rosenbaum's voice echoing on this beautiful lake. Again, this crazy contradiction of a place of beauty being a place of such destruction, but the power of her voice echoing on the lake. And then right outside of crematoria, we all said the Shema together. So I think in many ways, this was about leaving our imprint, about being alive and proudly Jewish in Berlin. So thank you all for hearing about our trip, and as Ariel said, we're happy to talk about it more at any time. May this be a transformative season of repentance for all of us. Shabbat Shalom.